Welcome to Natural Habitat Adventures Daily Dose of Nature, Wild Borneo, Wonders of the World's Third Largest Island, presented by Dr. Court Whelan. Court is NatHab's Director of Sustainability and Conservation Travel and has been guiding trips for us since 2013. Thanks for being with us today, Court. I'm going to hand things off to you.
Thanks, Kendall. Most appreciated. Thanks for not laughing at my very stylish hat. If you're wondering, I am wearing my Proboscis monkey hat today. You can kind of see it's got the eyes on top. I think it's made for a child, so it doesn't quite, can't really tell what's going on. I'm wearing it for a couple of reasons. I'm actually going to take it off because it's getting a little bit warm. Wearing it for a few reasons. One, it's really cold in Boulder today. It's like 5 degrees this morning. We've got a foot of snow on the ground. Welcome to winter. But the other reason is because, of course, it's Borneo, and Proboscis monkeys, spoiler alert, might be my favorite critter on the entire island. We're going to see a lot of critters today, but I wanted to start with, maybe perhaps my favorite. So we've got a fantastic audience today. You guys are breaking the records here. We've got almost 1,000 folks registered, which is fantastic. That means either you guys really, really like Borneo or you don't know anything about Borneo and you really, really want to learn about Borneo. Either way, that's fantastic. I'm really excited to hear it. Let's go ahead and dive right on in. Before I go too much further, I wanted to spend the next 10 or 15 minutes talking about this scientific paper about the influence of, kidding. This is not that kind of expedition. I have done those in the past, but no, this is going to be much more of a visual expedition. It will be full of knowledge and information. Hopefully you take away a lot of scientific tidbits you didn't previously know, but nevertheless, yeah, we're going to keep things kind of light and very visual for the course of this virtual expedition in Borneo. So I'm going to kind of start things off as I would any proper expedition. This might be our orientation. I'll introduce myself a little bit. I do a lot of webinars, so probably many of you in the audience do know me, but if you haven't yet met me or met me online, I wear a few different hats at NatHab, and when it comes to conservation and sustainability around the world, I love to take photographs. Most, if not all of these photographs in this presentation are from my various expeditions in the region over the years. I am a biologist and more importantly, an entomologist, which means I like bugs and insects. You can see here me guiding for our monarch butterfly trip down in Mexico, where about 500 million monarchs migrate, wearing my little butterfly pin on my hat. No, that's actually a real monarch butterfly. And one of my other favorite insects might be the giraffe-necked weevil of Madagascar, just down in the left-hand corner. I've been guiding for about 20 years, and I currently serve as our Director of Sustainability. So you may have heard previous webinars where I talk about carbon neutrality and some of the zero waste stuff that we're pioneering here in travel at Natural Habitat with World Wildlife Fund, all sorts of stuff going on there. But without further ado, let's go ahead and get right into it. So the other thing I would talk about with any of my groups going on an expedition or an adventure is a little bit of expectation setting. Let's define adventure. It's an unusually exciting, typically hazardous experience or activity. The cool thing is that this adventure, this expedition is going to be all the good stuff and none of the hazards. So no flat tires, no delayed airplanes, no rained out days. Every day is going to be perfect over the course of this next 45 minutes or an hour as we get into the wilds of Borneo. And another thing I like to say, I always start a lot of my Borneo trips off with this quote from a French author here. The voyage of discovery is not in seeking new landscapes, but in having new eyes. And we're going to see a lot of new landscapes, but I always encourage my folks, go into every day, every hour, in this case, every image with having new eyes, kind of like the innocence, the eyes of a child, because it's all weird and wacky. It's all new shapes and forms and colors and sizes and things of animals and wildlife and scenery you've never seen before. So go into it with new eyes. But maybe the most important thing I do on my expeditions is I start with one of my infamous, that means more than famous, right? Yeah, my infamous bug jokes. So let's just go ahead and start with one. Termite walks into a bar and asks, "Where is the bartender?" I know you guys are laughing out there. Tender, like it's a wooden bar. Where is the bartender? Yeah, so I like to set the bar super low on all my trips, and that's the best way to do so. So let's go ahead and jump right into it. Expedition Borneo. So first and foremost, now we get kind of a little bit more serious, but we'll play around from time to time. Borneo, this is Borneo to me. Borneo is a land of forest. It's dense jungle. It's the way the world should be in this magical, magical part of the world. I'll tell you, so I've been guiding in Borneo for a number of years, but it's been one of those places, growing up, watching the nature documentaries and getting into biology. It's one of those places that was just so high on my list because it set the bar for what real wilderness, what real tropical wilderness in a very, very far off part of the world could look like. And I can tell you, each and every expedition I do there leaves me more and more satisfied for the things I discover. So to set the stage a little bit, talk about, okay, maybe you don't know where Borneo is. That's totally fine. We're going to go ahead and look at it right here. We're looking at kind of this general Southeast Asia realm. It's technically part of Southeast Asia, but it's very much an island. It is the third largest island in the world. That's going to be after, any guesses, Greenland? And then the other is going to be New Guinea, actually this entire island right here. And then we've got Borneo, and if you watched my other webinar on Madagascar, you know, down here, fourth largest island over there. So this is Borneo. It's actually split between 3 different countries. We've got Indonesian Borneo, we've got Malaysian Borneo, which is what we're going to concentrate on today, and we've got the little nation of Brunei up here. So yeah, 3 countries represent the island. So when we talk about Borneo, we talk about the whole island because the flora and fauna is relatively contiguous throughout. So the expedition today, we're going to go over and start in Kuching. This is sort of that western side. And if you can imagine that line between Malaysian and Indonesian Borneo right about here, you'll notice Kuching is indeed in Malaysian Borneo. We're going to check out Bako National Park, this kind of beachside transitional forest. And then we're going to head up over to Sabah, the wildlife state, and check out Turtle Island. We're going to check out Sandakan and Sepalak, Kinematangan River, and end in Denim Valley. And I'm not going to go over too much of like the transportation details because we have a lot of slides. I'm surprised how many slides I put in today's presentation, so I'm going to be whipping through some of them pretty quickly because we've got a lot to cover, but a lot of great things to cover. So as you'll see, Borneo is right down the middle, is split by this relatively large chain of mountains, and it gets pretty high. Mount Kinabalu up here is actually close to 14,000 feet. In fact, it might be just over, I believe. It's really, really quite high up there. But we are going to spend most of our time in the lowlands. This is where all the biodiversity is. This is where the wonders are. So we're kind of going to be in this lower area where, again, all the wonders wait. So if there's a theme of this trip, if there's a theme of this expedition, it's discovering a biological treasure chest. And that's really what Borneo is all about. It is a big jungle. Jungle is a little bit of a colloquial word. It's not a true scientific term. Jungle, if you look it up, just kind of means a mess. Borneo is a beautiful mess of vines and lianas and big emergent trees and understory and wildlife and all sorts of stuff. But it is a tropical rainforest at a few different altitudinal gradients. But the lowland rainforest is really what it's all about. You can see, I mean, look at the scale of this. It's absolutely magnificent. It has just 1% of the world's land area, but 6% of the world's biodiversity. So if you do the math, carry the 1, I mean, that's a pretty big disproportionate amount of world biodiversity. It's home to 222 species of mammals. 44 of them are fully endemic, meaning found nowhere else in the world. You'll note, actually, comparing to other webinars I've done like Galapagos and Madagascar, other islands or island chains, Borneo does not quite have the same level of endemism, meaning the stuff that's there, there's actually a lot of stuff that's found in other parts, you know, in Southeast Asia proper, you know, in Thailand, in peninsular Malaysia, in Indonesia, and we'll talk about that maybe a little bit later. But so it's not necessarily that there is a high rate of endemism. It's not that things there are not found anywhere else. It's just that it's this massive refugia that hasn't been quite as touched by human civilization over the course of the centuries, and therefore has this extraordinary level of biodiversity. Over 400 bird species, 37 of them are endemic, 15,000 species of plants, and the list goes on and on. I think one of the coolest superlatives is that scientists average new discoveries of animals about 3 species per month for the last several decades. That's amazing. We're still discovering all sorts of new stuff. And a lot of these discoveries, when we're looking at more of the flora world, these are things that are found and go into medications and trials and whatnot. So there's still so much really good stuff to be seen, not just for the beautiful visual of it, but also some practicality as far as human civilization. So the other cool thing I love about Borneo is that, you know, going back to that other photo, we have a little proboscis bug here, and I'll show this guy later. As you know, I love my bugs. Is it doesn't just have all the normal small stuff of tropical rainforests. So a big reason why I love rainforests around the world is it has, you know, just amazing layers of the small, beautiful things that it takes you a little bit more time to find, a little bit more time to see and appreciate, but it's replete with these. So Borneo's got that. It's a rainforest, you know, big check mark, but it also has some of the biggest species of the world. So it has one of the largest monkey species. Again, we're back to our proboscis monkey friend here. It is home to a number of other primate species. It is home to a bear, the Bornean sun bear. Even though it's a big critter, it's actually the smallest bear in the world. It's home to pygmy elephants. And of course, the real elephant in the room is it's home to the only great ape found outside of Africa. So Borneo has this really unique point in this kind of cascade of critters, in that it's got all the normal kind of smaller tropical rainforest stuff, but it's got a lot of big stuff that you have a really high chance of seeing as well. So orangutans, we're actually gonna save a lot of the orangutan explanation discovery towards the end of this presentation. But I did want to mention right off the bat, people often hear the word orangutan and they put a G on the end. That's totally fine. If you ask a question after this presentation and say it that way, I'm gonna absolutely know what you mean. But the real pronunciation, the real word, is actually two separate Malay words, Malaysian words. Orangutan, which means man of the forest, kind of like this living local legend, because, you know, back before biologists discovered the island and categorized everything and identified everything, local tribes would just know of this hairy man walking through the forest that, you know, could be a little bit aggressive, and they called him the walking man of the forest, orangutan. So fun fact there. That's the first. It's the first fun party fact of the day. But so the wildlife, of course, is why we love it, why I go there. But the scenery, as you're going to see, is just extraordinary. And the style that we can see all this wonderful wildlife is really cool too. It's not just a walking safari or a driving safari. We're in these boats. We're going through small little canals and tributaries. It's really extraordinary. So let's just jump right into the expedition. Our first stop, we're going to be down here again on the west side. We're landing in Kuching. Kuching is a fun little town. I've got to say, actually, I'm going to zoom in real quick. Here we can see Kuching. It's actually a city of about 1 million people, believe it or not. In Malaysian Borneo, there are two real main cities, Kuching and Kota Kinabalu, or KK for short. But Kuching, yeah, about 1 million people. It's bustling, it's lovely. There are two things you sense and notice right off the bat as soon as you land in Kuching. It is filled with an immense amount of humidity, an immense amount of pride. People love their city. They keep it clean. They keep it vibrant. You know, you see signs like this. You know you're in somewhere unique because all the buildings. Yes, there's a little bit of the paint chipping off and whatnot. It is the tropics. You know, things they age quickly in some ways, but they often keep these buildings with fresh coats of paint of the wildlife on top, the things that they're really proud of. And you're like, wow, this is a big bustling city, and it is clearly a center of a wildlife mecca. Things are about to get interesting, and I really, really love this aspect of it. I always arrive a couple days early because I like to complete final logistics, get things ready before my expeditions. There's some great bookstores and some great coffee shops and some great street photography. I love Kuching because it's got all this wonderful ability to walk along the streets safely at any time of day, and you can take photos of spices and get these interesting street photographs. One of the things that I love most other than wildlife photography is market photography, and going to the markets and photographing the vibrant fiddlehead ferns that is such a big part of their dishes. So yeah, Kuching, we don't spend a lot of time there, but it's kind of fun to start the trip. It's a beautiful little city. Kuching, it is also known as the cat city, and I won't go into all the different murals of cats, but Kuching means cat in Chinese, and also I believe in Malay too, but there's this kind of like local lore of cats, and there's just all sorts of cat monuments and homages throughout the city. Just a fun aspect of things. But why we're here in this western side is mainly because we want to go to Bako National Park. What we're looking at, very, very close proximity to Kuching. It is not an island, but it's going to give off a very familiar island kind of vibe. It's actually this big peninsula right here. A very small national park, but in fact, one of the very first national parks on the island of Borneo. 50, 60 years ago, it was set aside as one. So we're going to land here at our boat jetty, and we're going to go just kind of out into the sea here, and we're going to go around and land on the main part of Bako National Park. I love this part. It's such a great jumping off point into the expedition. You're looking at all these cool little stilted houses just at the mouth of the river. Like so many things in this part of the world, like so many things in travel, you just know so tangibly, so viscerally that you're not in Kansas anymore. I mean, you are in a different part of the world. You know, getting in these little longboats, very shallow draft, and just speeding off into the kind of foggy abyss of the morning. And then within just a few minutes, maybe 20 minutes later, we're gonna arrive at this little area of Baco, and it's instantly, again, you're in somewhere very unique. It is replete with these sandstone and limestone formations, very akin to other riverine areas. If you've been in like the American Southwest and other places, you get this real interesting kind of eroded, smooth landstone. Here, this is actually an ancient formation of a very, very ancient river delta that laid down all the sedimentation and lithified, actually turned into rock about 20 million years ago, believe it or not. So now, as the oceans have receded a little bit, and we see some of this rock exposed with a little bit of uplift, we're seeing this beautiful, beautiful pattern of sandstone and limestone. And they come in all these crazy shapes and sizes. This one is actually known locally as the cobra head sea stack. You can't quite tell from this angle, but you can almost see it's as if it's like a snake head popping out of the water, and that seaside erosion, this is all salt water, is just lapping up, slowly whittling away at this relatively hard but also very porous sandstone. As we land on the beach, we're gonna roll up our pants, we're gonna actually wade in the water, this crystal clear ocean water, very warm as well, just in a few inches of water, and we can actually walk right up to the sandstone. You can touch it, you can feel it. I mean, it's smooth as can be, and oftentimes we'll see little crabs and little tide pools and little critters crawling amongst this. It's a beautiful, beautiful first foray into this island nation, into what, again, looks very much like an island national park. We are surrounded by mangroves, and we're walking on these really cool boardwalks that have been put in place. Mangroves, something I would love to tell you more about, on an expedition like this in person, but they are one of the most important biomes, one of the most important trees and habitats in the world for so many reasons. And they're really underrepresented in the world of conservation. They're just now being understood as, the fish nurseries. They are the lungs of the ocean and the air. They represent a huge, important biome, and we're gonna get up and close and personal to these guys. Take lots of great photographs, of course. One of the other things we're gonna notice as soon as we land on this beach is that there are pigs. Actually, these are totally wild. These are Bornean wild boars or wild hogs. They are not aggressive, but they all have these real big bristly beards, the males and the females, and they're just kind of scurrying along, and they're just rooting through the soil, rooting through the sand, looking for some crab, looking for some roots, and I'll let you be the judge as to how photogenic these guys really are, but I love them. As we're in Baco National Park, again, this boardwalk goes into the forest itself. So when I talk about a coastal transitional forest, that means you get this great beachside area that has all the normal kind of maritime oceanic stuff, the mangroves, the fish, the coral reefs, the big sandstone formations, but also as you just go inland, you get into a whole nother world that has, believe it or not, in this very small national park, most every species found in lowland Borneo. We're starting off with one of the best places to see Proboscis monkeys right at the start of the trip. And these are one of my favorite monkeys. They're absolutely incredible. They're pretty large. The males can stand, 3-4 feet. They can weigh up to 40-45 pounds, the big males. The big males also have these big noses, the proboscis, the nose. So you can tell here just this profile. I mean, what an extraordinary animal. Part of the reason I love these guys, not just because they're so photogenic, but they're also a bit underrepresented in the world of conservation. Again, orangutans in Borneo get a lot of the press, a lot of the publicity, a lot of the research focus. However, believe it or not, proboscis monkeys are even more rare, even more endangered, and are in a more restricted area in the world versus orangutans. You'll see later when we talk about orangs, they are found in 3 different populations, 3 different species of orangutans, only one proboscis monkey only on the main island of Borneo. So you'll notice a big difference between the males and the females. Very interesting. So these big noses here by the males, big dominant males, it takes a big dominant male to grow that big nose. It's all hormonally based. The females, very, very much smaller nose, almost dainty, you could say. The younger males have a very, very similar appearance. It's quite difficult to actually tell the difference because they have that very similar appearance. They don't have that big collar of fur. It's almost like a vest if you look. What happens is that the big males, like any primate, they have to ascend to the ranks. They've got to get out there and be dominant. They have to acquire a harem, so to speak, a troop, and then gradually that nose grows, and that shows that they're even more dominant as sort of a display to the other males in the area. The jury is still totally out on why they have the noses. There are a few hypotheses. throughout the years, a really good one that I liked was that, well, maybe the nose is almost like a snorkel. And it seems weird, but these are actually quite aquatic monkeys. They live on or near water, no matter where they're at. You'll see more slides, more photos from the Kinematagen. So maybe that big nose is like when they're swimming, they can kind of hold up and get air. But then we ask, well, why would the females not have big noses? So it's kind of, the other hypothesis is that, well, when we're in the tropics in areas that are very, very warm, we often have very large appendages or very large extremities, very thin, long arms or fingers. Sometimes when you see foxes, like fennec foxes or bat-eared foxes, big ears to help displace that heat. So maybe that nose is like one of those things that just helps exude the heat to try to thermoregulate, to try to air condition themselves. But again, why would the young males not have it? Why would the females not have it? So ultimately, we view this as a sexual selection thing. What it means is that those big noses display dominance. They are more attractive for the females because of their dominance. If you're a dominant male, you're able to look after your troop better. You're able to defend against other males that may want to come in and do harm to the troop. And then the latest thing is that it's vocalization. So these monkeys have at least 21 different vocalizations in 3 different groups of these hems and these haws and these oinks and all that. In fact, I can go ahead and do my impression of one of them. This is not a joke, but I should probably put on my proboscis monkey hat for it. But they really do sound like this. So the big males, they're in the trees and they're just sitting there like a person, lounging, and it sounds very much like and it's so hilarious but so amazing to see as this big male is up there and its nose is going like this and just kind of moving around, and he's going and he's essentially calling out to his harem in his troop to make sure everybody's in line. Like, don't stray off too far because over there's a different troop, there's different males, and we want to keep you guys safe. It's so fascinating. So now the dominant theory as to why proboscis monkeys have that big nose. It's only the dominant males once they ascend to that rank, and it's probably for some sort of ability to mate with females and ability to display dominance and vocalize further to defend their troop against other troops. Very interesting. You can see from this Michael Jordan profile, these guys are extremely adept in the air. They jump massive distances. You can see from this photo another big male. You can see the coloration differences in that sort of collar and that vest. Obviously, big nose. Very long appendages, very human-like, so they can leap massive distances, and it's guaranteed to see. I mean, if you're watching these guys long enough, they'll just be sitting there munching on leaves 1 second and then go leaping, bursting in the other direction the next second. And last but not least, the babies are pretty much just as cute as any baby monkey out there. So they get a big thumbs up for that too. I love Baku because it's one of the few places that you are likely to see this beautiful emerald green Bornean keeled pit viper. Now, for those of you that don't like snakes out there, hide your eyes to the next slide. It's a little bit closer. These guys could not be more lackadaisical. They could not be more calm. I've never seen them move even an inch. And for whatever reason, we always find these guys on this little part of the island. They do pretty well. And I often tell people that are truly afraid of seeing snakes, I'm like, I look for snakes. I try to find snakes, and snakes are just kind of rare to see. They don't really want to be seen, but this guy, Bornean keeled pit viper in Baku National Park, almost always a guarantee. Really fun stuff. So let's cool off. It's a hot day, it's humid. Let's go ahead and drink some coconut water to cool off a little bit at my favorite little coconut stand just outside the jetty, and we'll move on from there. Before we make the trek from Kuching all the way to that northeast part of the island, we're going to stop at our very first Orangutan Sanctuary in Semenggah. I think this is a really unique chance to see orangutans very early on in the trip. This is a semi-wild scenario. Unfortunately, the forest has been sort of closed in around a few square miles of this Orangutan Sanctuary. These orangutans do not have to come by the areas, they do not have to come by the platforms, but what they do is they will provide them with some antibiotics, they'll maintain them, they'll do some research, make sure they're a healthy population, just to make sure that they're doing quite well in this smaller little patch of forest. But it's really cool to know that these are semi-wild, they're under entirely their own guise to do whatever they would like to do. And it's a good chance to see one of the 3 big males in the area too. Really fascinating to see these guys. And again, big what we call sexual dimorphism. So the difference between males and females here, we have a male with her young offspring, a female with her young offspring, sort of that oval-like face, very round face with those big cheek flanges, the male. Stick with me until the end of this presentation. We'll talk about seeing these guys in the wild and why the big males have these cheek flanges. It's quite interesting. So remember, we're down here and we're gonna fly up to here to the northeast. We're gonna land in a little area of Sandakan. Just to kind of give context, so this is the state of Sabah. So we're zooming in on this state right here, and hopefully you can see my mouse moving. Sabah is a wildlife lover's paradise. It is the heart and the soul of the real wilds of Borneo. It's incredible, simply put. So the first thing we're gonna do is we're gonna switch gears a little bit from that inland forest, and we're gonna get more into the beach zone out to Turtle Islands. You can see here, I'm just gonna go back. See this little Turtle Island park of these 3 small little islands just off the coast of Borneo, and we're gonna land at our own little beautiful private island for one night. Why are we here? Well, it's not so much because the accommodations are fantastic. This is a research station, but it is an amazing glimpse to see a research project and to see nesting green sea turtles. I'll show you some photos in a second, but it's a very, very unique set of islands, and there's actually, I believe, 7 more islands, just another stretch after those that belong to the Philippines, but these 3 are part of Malaysian Borneo. And what happens is every night of the year, anywhere between 15 and 65 green sea turtles, females, come to shore, dig out a pit, lay their eggs, and go back into the ocean every night of the year. So you've probably known and heard about how this happens in places like Costa Rica and Mexico and really all around the world, but it's very, very seasonal. There's only certain months that it happens. In Borneo, on these islands, for whatever reason, every single night of the year, dozens come ashore, and we actually get to be a part of the process. Part of the big reason this was established several decades ago was to boost the chance of essentially hatchling survival. So if you know anything about sea turtles, you know that they lay a ton of eggs and they have no parental care. You know, they just let the eggs hatch, they let them go, and unfortunately not a whole lot of them make them to adulthood. You combine that with the fact that every single species of sea turtle in the world is under pretty serious threat and is endangered. This group of researchers got together with the Malaysian government and said, well, this is maybe one of the better places to build this routine set of egg collection and harborage, so we can actually put them in these little pens under the sand, monitor them, and increase the chance of survival, you know, many, many, many times. And it's working. It's absolutely working. So every night of the year, they're able to collect eggs and then redistribute eggs off the coast into the waters. And what that's doing is hopefully boosting the population of green sea turtles. So while we're there, remember, you know, these female sea turtles might come to shore, you know, a few times a year or once every couple of years, you know, staggered throughout the generations, because these guys get quite old. Is we're seeing one female turtle, this little group of us, we'll see one female sea turtle come to shore, dig a sand pit. We're seeing the whole thing. It's absolutely phenomenal. We're being very judicious with one single light, just so we can appreciate the phenomenon. She's never going to see a light probably ever again in her life. And then the researchers are going to go ahead and let her go be on its way, leave a few eggs in that pit, but then remove most of the clutch, which could be anywhere from 30 to 80 eggs. And then again, what they're doing is they're taking them to this little area, and they're making sure that no predators on land, like the monitor lizards or the gulls, other birds, they're making sure that none of those things can dig up these pits and have a feast on those little baby sea turtles. So it really increases survival. It's absolutely amazing. And I'll say, you know, one of the coolest times I've had on this island was actually this past year, this past August. Is my group and I, we were waiting for night to unfold. We were waiting for the turtles to come to shore and the rangers to get us and take us to that one female sea turtle. And we were sitting on the shore, we were going snorkeling and swimming, and it was beautiful. And all of a sudden, we see these little things in the sand moving. We say, wait, what in the world's going on? Because these don't normally hatch during the day, right? They hatch under the cover of night. They need the moonlight to navigate. And for whatever reason, this random clutch of green sea turtle eggs hatched. And you know, what happened is they didn't know where to go because it's daylight. This is just an anomalous thing. And so we were starting to walk into the forest, and like, that's the wrong way to go. So as good stewards and ambassadors, I got my group together and said, we've got to save these turtles. And normally we don't like to touch wildlife. We don't like to handle them because we want to let Mother Nature do its own thing. But in this setting, we were able to individually, kind of like on an Easter egg hunt, collect these little baby sea turtles, carry them to shore, wish them on their way. And because none of the aquatic predators are used to sea turtles coming out in the day, I bet you these guys had a really good chance of survival. So a really, really fun experience. You never know what Mother Nature is going to give you, and that was really a fun experience out there on Turtle Island. Selengen Island is the proper name. Okay, so we did our little quick one night. We saw some amazing turtles. We had a great time in those beautiful coral reefs. We're headed back to shore now. We're heading to the jetty, and we're gonna go check out a really, really cool conservation center, and we're gonna get to see our bears of Borneo. This is pretty wild. Bears of Borneo, you say? Yeah, believe it or not all bears live in the mountains. They don't all fish for salmon. Some are tropical, and they have special adaptations from you can see here. Very, very long tongues, all of them. They are specialists in, any guesses? Ants and termites. They gorge themselves on these arboreal ants and termite mounds that can be found high up in the trees as they use their bear-like abilities to climb the trees and have a bit of a feast. So look at that tongue. That's one of my favorite photos that I was able to capture these guys at this conservation center. So quick step back. You may have thought to yourself, well, what in the world? Bornean sun bears, what other kind of bears are there in the world? Well, quite a few species, 8 to be exact. So what we're looking at the sun bear right here. We're kind of in the realm of modern day bear species. So you've got some sort of weird bear relatives like the raccoons and the lesser pandas, red pandas as they're sometimes called. We've got the giant panda, which is absolutely a bear species, but it's split off many millions of years ago. We've got the spectacled bear and sloth bear. One's found in South America, one's found in the continent of Asia, mostly in India. So we're now looking at this divergence here of the sun bears, the American black bear, the Asiatic black bear, polar bear, and grizzly bear, or brown bear as it's sometimes called. So yes, sun bears are a thing. They are the world's smallest bear. They top in and around 200 pounds or so. They can be much smaller. They are arboreal. They climb trees, and you can see these big claws for excavating those termite mounds and those ant mounds. It's pretty extraordinary to see them. You can tell they don't have real thick hair, which is obviously a thing because they're living in the tropics. They don't need to defend themselves against a harsh winter or spring or fall climate. They of course do not hibernate because they've got food year round. But they are in trouble. They are one of the again, kind of neglected species throughout the years of conservation because we just didn't know enough about them. They were so rare to begin with. They're so elusive to begin with. We didn't know how imperiled they were. Enter Dr. Wong Sute, who was up for a CNN Hero of the Year nomination. Great guy, great colleague, great friend. He manages the Bornean Sun Bear Conservation Center. He actually did a webinar for us a couple months ago. So if you want to go check that out, he's a great speaker, great knowledge, a wealth of information about sun bears. And I will say, I'm gonna brag about him a little bit. I think he single-handedly is bringing sun bears back from the edge of extinction. And you can see here the level of care and involvement he's got is just extraordinary. So we go to his center. It is a semi-wild habitat. They are in enclosures because they want to monitor them. These are orphan sun bears. They're sun bears that are captured from the pet trade. They're sun bears that were out in the wild, maybe had very little chance of survival because they were encroaching on like a palm oil plantation or a homestead. He brings them in. He's got, I think, 40 or 50 young little sun bears now, and it's extraordinary to witness them in their natural habitat and get some great photographs. So a quick story here. So for a number of years, Natural Habitat has been sponsoring sun bears at the sanctuary, and I head up a small little philanthropic division of NatHab known as NatHab Philanthropy. And we adopted one sun bear named Wawa for a couple of years now. So each and every time I get to Borneo, I talk to Dr. Wong and I say, hey, is there any chance you can see Wawa? And frankly, they all look the same. We're looking a little bit of ways, and the only way to really tell is the exact pattern on the breast, on the chest, that sun kind of crescent shape you'll see in a second. And so we were at the end of this platform. We were looking at bears a couple trips ago, and I said, Wong, any chance that's Wawa? And I said, well, not really sure. So here's this perfect bear. I've never gotten better photos in my life of a sun bear in a tree. And all of a sudden, I think she heard us talking about her. They are not trained to know their names, but all of a sudden this bear started turning around. And just like it's hard to get, I haven't gotten great sun bear photos in trees before. It's really hard. They kind of protect this little chest sign because it's often in the big wild shown as a sign of aggression. If they flash this, it's kind of like their big, whoa, startle effect. And here we go, this bear is just putting on this show for us. And Dr. Wong, astutely, looked at that crescent shape, that sun shape, and said, oh my gosh, that is Wawa. That's the bear that you've adopted. And you know, the universe has a funny way of working. So then for the next 30 minutes with my small little expedition, my small group, we're just sitting there, and she put on the show for us. She sat down, she displayed that crescent shape. I've never been so close and gotten better photos of a sun bear before. And then of course it gets even better. She calls her buddies in, they get in the tree, it's a perfect background. And we're just looking at her, we're just talking about her, and she's just looking at us, smiling back, saying, yeah, you know, thanks guys, thanks NatHab. It's cool stuff. So we move on from there at the Borneo Sun Bear Sanctuary, and right next door is another one of these wonderful orangutan sanctuaries. Like I said, I'm going to save a lot of the orangutan talk to the end when we actually get to see them. We find them ourselves out in the wilds of Denim Valley, but nevertheless, we are seeing orangutans again, getting some semi-wild orangutans just right next door, eating leaves, going about their business. It's really extraordinary, but the trip is building. We are now to sort of the real deal wilds of Borneo. We're going from Sandakan, and we're actually going to go to the Kinematangan River, this riverway right here. We're going to zoom in, follow here. It's a little bit of a pixelated shot. I had to take it from online, but we're just going around the outside from Sandakan out here into the mouth of the Kinematangan River, and instantly it's like we're just in, you know, this nature documentary. We're seeing all this nipa palm. For those of you that are familiar with palm oil, this is not palm oil. This is actually a floating raft vegetation. Proboscis monkeys love this. Macaque monkeys love this. We'll get to the palm oil talk here in a bit, rest assured. And we're seeing all this extraordinary village life, the people of the water, the people of the river, and almost right off the bat, we're seeing more proboscis monkeys. Probably more proboscis monkeys live on the Kinematangan than anywhere else in Borneo, and we're seeing them close, we're seeing their antics. But we're also seeing different species of monkeys. This is a really, really unique one. I want to spend a few minutes talking about this guy. So as we spot these from the trees, these are known as the silver leaf monkeys, or the silver langurs. Leaf monkeys and langurs, kind of tomato. It's the same thing. You can hear people, you know, calling them each. But the silver langur here is a really cool one. The locals actually have a different name. They call it the David Beckham leaf monkey. I kid you not, for that kind of mohawky thing. I think that was back when he wore his hair as a mohawk soccer player, if you're not familiar. So yeah, the David Beckham langur is really fantastic. So we're watching, you know, right off the bat, as soon as we get our boat into this river, we are seeing extraordinary sights and sounds. And sunsets on the Kinematangan are pretty darn good. You can get some of the best photos of your life just with your smartphone. So it's really extraordinary. I love the way we see the Kinematangan River, because we're able to get in these small little boats and get down the tributaries all the way from these small little overhangs, these beautiful kind of light and dark schematics looking for wildlife, all the way to the proper center of the river, where it's just big open expanses. And we're looking around for all sorts of stuff. But let me come back to these guys for a second. So this is the same, that silver monkey, the silver langur. Notice in this view, in this lighting, it's got much more of a silver effect, that kind of shimmery salt and pepper look. But look at its young, look at her offspring here. And you might want to ask yourself, or you probably are asking, why the orange baby? So this is an interesting one. A lot of gregarious critters, especially primates, especially monkeys, gregarious, just a fancy way of saying social. They move and they live in troops. They're gregarious, they're social. They will have wildly different colored offspring for the first year or so of its life. And you may be guessing, and if you were a live audience, I could probably hear you chime in right now. It's an interesting thing. You would think, okay, so they're the most vulnerable of this species, most vulnerable to troop. Why would they stand out like a siren for all the eagles, for all the snakes, for all the big cats that live in Borneo? Why in the world? Well, basically the dominant theory has been proved, and of course science will try to disprove it and all that, but nevertheless, what we're looking at is the ability to, in the present or in the state of danger. So like, let's say the alarm goes off and these langurs see a snake, they see a clouded leopard, they see some sort of other troop moving in. They want to be able to, as quickly as possible, put their eyes collectively, the aunts and uncles, the mother and father, the brothers and sisters, they want to collectively look for where are the most vulnerable members of our troop. Where are the young? Let's go get them. Let's protect them first. And the way they do that is by having that wildly different color to signify the most vulnerable. Very, very fascinating stuff. You'll see that for a lot of other species out there, even you know, some bovids, sometimes with cattle, sometimes with bison, et cetera, et cetera. You see those wildly different colors and you say, shouldn't they be the most camouflaged? Well, gregarious behavior, social behavior actually says no. quite interesting. Now, in rare cases, you can actually have the adults as the same color. I just figured I'd show this here because this is a really rare photo that I got a couple of years ago on one of these expeditions. And this is actually the same species, but this is one of these recessive color morphs. So if you're familiar with what's known as a spirit bear, kind of like the white morph, the rare white morph of a black bear, same thing with these guys. So sometimes about 5% of the population, you'll get these orange colored adults too, which is quite interesting. And it's just a wild scene to unfold in front of you on the Kinematangan. But of course, throughout the river, we're seeing other primates. We're seeing young macaque monkeys, and we're just constantly aghast, just like this little baby, just surprised at how much we're seeing because it's teeming with wildlife. More and more proboscis monkeys. I think the Kinematagen is probably the best place to see these guys on the entire island, and the best place to see their their leaping Michael Jordan-like behavior, and just kind of every single troop that you see, these troops in the range of anywhere from 12 to 30 individuals at times can be seen bouncing from tree to tree, eating leaves, playing with one another. It's pretty extraordinary. So why in the world is the Kinematangan such a great place for primates and proboscis monkeys specifically? Well, it's sort of interesting, and it has something to do with this guy. So this is one of I think maybe the only photo in here that's not mine. I unfortunately don't have a good photo of a clouded leopard, is what this guy is. These are the apex predators of Borneo, really one of the apex predators of Southeast Asia. And they're extraordinary. It is absolutely a bucket list item for me to photograph one this good. But anyway, so clouded leopards, they are around. They are the main predators. A lot of these monkeys, especially the big monkeys like the proboscis. So what happens is all these monkeys, they're folivores, so they're eating leaves, they're eating fruits. And what happens is as night falls and as these cats become more and more active, the monkeys say, okay, let's start hedging our bets. Let's start getting as most protected as we can. So what they do is they actually come out to this big river's edge and they put their backs to the river. So they put their backs to the river and they look inland and they form this big line, almost like a wall. So they have their entire troop of, a dozen or so of these animals, individuals, and they're just kind of like on clouded leopard lookout because they know there's no clouded leopard coming from the river. Even though these cats may swim from time to time, they're not ambushing from this side. So they're looking for this way. It basically increases their chance of survival, more or less by 50% by dialing that back, looking only at the one direction. So quite interesting. So shifting away a little bit from the wildlife, the animals, I think the plant life is really fascinating in Borneo. And as we get into the Kinematangan, we're seeing, I think, probably one of the coolest plants out there, the pitcher plant. And these have made their way to plant shops and gardens. So you may be sort of familiar with these guys, but I bet you're not familiar with all the forms of them. So this is kind of the traditional form. We've got a little bit of a lid on it. We've got the pitcher, which is a hollowed out core. But they can take all shapes and sizes. A lot of them are hanging from vines. Some of them are found in big clusters on the ground. You can see this is the exact same thing, these pitchers. So the deal is that these plants are actually carnivorous. What they have is they have a little bit of a standing water pool at the bottom with a little bit of almost like an oil to break the surface tension of that water. So what happens is an ant comes crawling around or a grasshopper takes the wrong fall, or maybe a little fly smells something sweet because they do secrete a little bit of a sweet sugary liquid. They go in there, the walls are very slick, they fall in that water. It's hard to get their balance. They can't, sit on the top of water like a mosquito would because that surface tension draws them in. And then on the inside of these guys, they have all these spikes and thorns that prevent the smaller stuff or the bigger stuff from getting out. And what happens is slowly this plant digests these animals. And you wonder, why in the world does a plant need to eat animals? Can't they photosynthesize, et cetera, et cetera? Well, they've evolved this way. But what they have found, so in the world of plants, one of the main limiting ingredients for success is nitrogen. So we often know from our fertilizer bags, they have nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, all that. The hardest thing to find in these parts of the forest, believe it or not, is nitrogen. If you look at these forests and these swamps, there's almost none to be had. What's the dominant thing in living forms that they get out of them? Nitrogen. So they're actually able to figure out a way to get their limiting ingredient by turning into meat eaters. Crazy stuff. Life is pretty wild out there. But pitcher plants, I absolutely love to see them. Kinematangan, excellent area. I have not touched on the bird life very much because I could probably do an entire other webinar on bird life. Rhinoceros hornbill, the greatest bird in the world, I think. These are absolutely extraordinary. You can see this big pompadour coming up, this casque that's actually sometimes hollow, actually most of the time hollow, for the various 8 species of hornbill in Borneo. And getting these guys in flight is fantastic, but sometimes you get really, really lucky, like on an expedition 2 years ago, you can actually photograph a breeding pair sitting in the tree at close range. And there's just nothing that really makes me happier in life than getting that perfect shot. You can see here the sexual dimorphism, that change, the difference between male and female, just the color of the iris. Pretty cool stuff, huh? So I think Kinematagen, for those bird lovers and those bird photographers, probably maybe another best place in the world to photograph birds in flight. So check this out, Brahminy kite, kind of like their version of a bald eagle, very much a fish eater, extraordinary critter. We could just see these guys flying overhead as we're cruising these small boats all day. But maybe the most magnificent thing we can see in the Kinematangan, elephants. The elephant in the room, the elephant in the river, these guys are fantastic. They are known as Bornean pygmy elephants. And before you go start thinking, you know, that I have a macro lens on and they fit in a teacup, they're not that small. An elephant's still an elephant. So a quick little digest on that. We've got the 3 main elephants of the world. Of course, we have subspecies, but the 3 main kind of hierarchy forms. We've got the African elephant, the Asian elephant, and then perhaps a 3rd species, the Asian or Bornean pygmy elephant. You'll notice that it's really only a foot shorter at its shoulders. It's still a pretty big animal. You know, I could go into a lot of depth on whether these are a species or not. The current hypothesis is that they are indeed their own species, meaning there's enough genetic difference. They've been separated from the mainland long enough that they probably wouldn't be able to breed with the mainland population of Asian elephants any longer. They do look different. They're quite a bit smaller. They come to the river's edge. They are forest-dwelling elephants, so they're able to navigate and move through the trees a little bit more, but they still look quite a bit like the classic Asian elephant. Smaller ears, that doubly domed head, a little bit more of like a hump at the back rather than the big broad shoulders of the African elephant. And of course, like all elephants, they have really cute babies. Look at this little guy with this little trunk. Yeah, just fantastic. There's nothing that makes a group of expeditioners and a guide happier than seeing elephants on the river. We see the elephants in the back here. Guide, big thumbs up. Very, very happy group of adventurers. The Kinematangan is where it's at. It's one of my favorite places in the world. But we're actually getting to, I think, literally my favorite place in the world next. I know, it's a big statement. Write it down. You'll see it. You'll get to it. Before that, I do have to talk about this because as we move from the Kinematangan to Denim Valley, we do notice something different about the landscape. It starts to look really, really green, but really, really uniform, big rows of trees. And we're wondering, well, what's going on? Are these planted? And pretty quickly we start to notice, well, probably because I tell my group, is we're in oil palm country. So palm oil is an interesting topic. It's controversial, but it is inherently a not great thing. It's controversial in the sense that as an agricultural product, as a producer of oil, like cooking oil, as an oil used in solvents, it's used in so much stuff from lipstick to ice cream to ramen noodles. So it's a thing that is, it's an amazing product. Palm oil per acre, per unit of area of land, it produces about 10 times more oil than the next best oil, like grapeseed and others. So it's very, very interesting that it's highly productive. It's been used for centuries as small little subsistence farms in the back of people's homes, 2 or 3 oil palms, just to produce cooking oil. It's got all the healthy fats and whatnot of a lot of oils out there. The problem is, you know, we humans, we find a good thing, a productive thing, and we go crazy with it. And we put it in everything. It's like, oh, it's like a cheap, easy to produce oil. And the big problem is that habitat is being converted in the tropics worldwide, not just Borneo, the tropics worldwide, into oil palm plantations. It's kind of interesting looking. It's, you know, it's green, it's photosynthesizing, it's drawing carbon from the atmosphere, just like a lot of other things. The problem is when we have a monoculture, when we have one crop, it destroys the biodiversity of the forest, unfortunately. There are a few things that exist there, namely rats, snakes. Actually, believe it or not, some of the bigger cats of Borneo have been found in oil palms, subsisting pretty well. But the problem is biodiversity is that that collective memory over hundreds of millions of years, the failures and successes of life to get to where we are right now. That's what gives us the balance of life. It's why when you see nature, you say, how in the world did nature do that? Well, it's had millions, hundreds of millions, and billions of years to perfect itself. And when you convert an area of land into something that is an agricultural product without that biodiversity, you delete the memory. You hit a hard refresh and a hard boot on your computer, and you no longer have that knowledge that might get us to that next level, might ultimately, protect and save our species as well as all those species on Earth. So this is what it kind of looks like. This is not my photo again. This is an aerial view that I haven't had the chance to see yet. But you can see how it just goes right up into the forest. The best thing to do if you're interested in learning more on this, and then I don't want this presentation to be too much of a downer, but the best thing you can do is make yourself aware of it, research it, look it up. I'm going to show this web address at the end of this presentation again. I think it's a great place to start. From there, you can branch off into different things. Google is a great resource. Just Googling some hot topics like sustainable palm oil. There's a way to do it sustainably. WF Palm Oil, the Palm Oil Roundtable is a group of various companies around the world that are boycotting unsustainable palm oil. Anyway, I'll let it rest, but it is a problem for Borneo. It is a problem for our world. So the best thing you can do is make yourself informed and form your own decisions from what you research out there. So like I said, we are moving from here to here. Between this, even though we have this little conservation area here, there's still a lot of intact ecosystem throughout here. So I don't want you to think that this entire state of Stava is all palm oil. It's a lot of healthy forest, but in terms of the high quality of what we call primary forest, there's nothing quite like the Denim Valley. It is absolutely extraordinary. This is a photo I showed earlier. When I say primary rainforest, that means it's never been logged ever before in the history of man. A lot of rainforests actually have. They just rebounded in the centuries and centuries since the last logging, maybe a thousand years ago or so. So it's just magnificent. It's got all the big, tall, massive emergent trees. I'm looking up here at a 300-foot tall tree easily. And it's what makes my heart pitter patter. It's kind of a Garden of Eden. It's got all the rare butterflies, the beautiful little insects, the extraordinary things. It's like, honestly, to me, how the world is meant to be, Denim Valley. If you take nothing else away from this presentation, be intrigued by this place, Google it, check it out. We are in Denim Valley on this expedition and we're loving it. There's all sorts of stuff in Denim Valley. If you don't like bugs, maybe Denim Valley isn't for you. But what tells me this is a healthy ecosystem is that every single type of life form can be found here. And even though I may have found this guy from the railing and put him on the table just to take a photograph of him, these guys are found around the lights at night, and these massive, beautiful rhinoceros beetles are really, really spectacular. One of the most beautiful places on Earth, Denim Valley. And this is where we are trekking to find our entirely wild, entirely happy and healthy orangutans. It's really, really special to see these guys. We're seeing populations with mothers and young. We're seeing some of the big males. We're seeing them make nests at night. We're seeing them come down. There are researchers that actively track them in this Denim Valley area because it's one of the best places to understand and study the behavior of wild orangutans out there. So I promise you I'll explain these big cheek flanges. Why do big dominant males have this? Well, if you remember back when I was talking about the proboscis nose, it's this resonating chamber, the nose is for the other monkeys. It's a very, very similar thing for orangutans. So orangutans, they don't necessarily have the same suite of vocalizations. So the proboscis monkeys, many, many different types of hems and haws. Orangutan males are really the main ones that do vocalize. It is a big growl. I love not telling my groups, so spoiler alert, I love telling folks when we're on these expeditions, nothing about orangutan growls, not any heads up that it might happen. And we're in the jungle and all of a sudden we hear this growl coming from, could be a half a mile away. And everybody looks around, you're looking around right now. They're like, holy cow, is this a clouded leopard? Is something following us? Are there tigers in Borneo? And no, it's actually just a big male orangutan using this parabolic shape of its head to actually send those airwaves, send that noise out to carry, again, up to a half a mile away. It's pretty extraordinary. Orangutans do build nests, a new nest every single night of the year. You can see this is another, I have not taken a good photo of a orangutan nest, but you can kind of see this. The branches are broken up. It takes them about 5 minutes to make a little nest every single night of the year, and they sleep in the trees. So as we continue on, we're sort of wrapping up the presentation. We got a few more slides, and I wanted to quickly go into where orangutans fit in their relation to humans and other apes. But remember, I would love to take your questions here in a few minutes. So if you haven't yet entered your question, please do so, and Kendall will read those off for me. But so here we see here the whole primate family tree. And as you probably remember from my lemur presentation in Madagascar, these guys are some of the most ancestral primates, our oldest cousins. And we come all the way down, lorises, tarsiers, both of which are found in Borneo, gibbons found in Borneo, go back here, orangutans. So orangutans are actually some of the oldest of the great apes, the other great ape being the gorillas of mainland Africa. Interesting tidbit, although we share a lot of DNA with orangutans, something like in the high 90s, I think about 95, 96% with orangutans, we are actually more closely related to mountain gorillas than mountain gorillas are related to orangutans. There's actually many millions of years of evolution between the two. Another interesting fun fact. So we are more closely related to the great apes of Africa than those great apes are to the great ape of Borneo. So, like I said, there are indeed 3 species of orangutans. The Bornean orangutan is probably the most numerous, found throughout the island of Borneo in these patches and pockets here. Big population in Indonesian Borneo. Maybe we'll take some questions at the end if you guys are curious about what's going on down there. Not as well understood, not as much infrastructure, not as much research and conservation going on down there. But nevertheless, there are orangutans. We've got 2 different species over here in Sumatra. The Sumatran orangutan looks very, very similar, a little bit taller, a little bit longer hair. And then a very, very new species actually just discovered, just named a couple of years ago, known as the Tapanuli orangutan, which we believe probably speciated off from the Sumatran. We're not exactly sure when. They look pretty similar, but their DNA is just different enough that they are indeed a 3rd species. So orangutans, we love them because they are the great apes. They are closely related to us. There's the mannerisms, the digits, the fingers, the expressions, the musculature, how the appendages work. We can watch these guys for a while, and it's really interesting. And I'll kind of, as I sort of wrap this up, I think one of the most amazing experiences to me was a couple of years ago. Actually, no, I think it was last year's expedition. I was looking at this female and young offspring here. So female here, young offspring, and she's moving on to a different tree. They're eating on figs from this tree right off of our eco lodge. And she's moving off into a different tree, time to get some fresh food, some fresh fruit. But there's this big gap. And this is a very young infant, a young baby. And we were wondering, it's kind of looking at mom and saying, well, geez, I'm going to jump. How do I do this? You haven't taught me how to swing and leap quite yet. But here we go, this maternal instinct, this mother, she's just casually eating her flowers and her figs and her fruit, and she starts using her legs to pull the other tree. Amazing, amazing strength. Pull this other tree closer. You can see how determined she is, and gradually she yanks it, and the baby just goes right over and climbs on her, and they move on. It was this amazing display of maternal fortitude and strength. And here's our group right here watching this, like 25 feet off the same place we have our breakfast in the morning on this particular expedition. Really, really cool stuff. Another primate we see in Denim Valley is the red leaf monkey. For a long time, often confused as a baby orangutan, but no, it's a different species. They're animated. And just like I was talking about with that silver langur, check out what these red leaf monkeys have as their offspring, little white offspring. Pure white as they're born, and they get gradually more and more maroon colored as they age. Quite interesting. Again, that gregarious behavior, looking out for the young. We've got another very weird species, a flying lemur. Not a true lemur, but also known as a colugo. These guys are fascinating. They're kind of like a flying squirrel with this big, big wing base. Animals in Borneo love to glide and fly through the forest, but they're actually more of just a controlled glide. There are even things like flying frogs that we might see. The nocturnal critters are extraordinary here in Denim Valley. To see sleeping birds that sometimes do sleep with their eyes open, like this little blue-eared kingfisher. And of course, like I said, I tout all the smaller things in Borneo that I truly love. There aren't just proboscis monkeys, there are proboscis bugs as well. This big nasut, this big nose kind of coming off as an appendage, not used to smell, just as sort of a display mechanism, but so colorful. But I think, to cap it all off, maybe my most extraordinary wildlife sighting here in Borneo, something I've been looking for. I saw this a couple of years ago. expeditions for 15 plus years looking for these guys, the Western tarsier, and they're the most interesting animals to me. They their eyes cannot move in their sockets, so they're very much like an owl where they can rotate their head like 180 degrees. They are nocturnal or crepuscular. They're very active at dawn and dusk as well, but they don't have the same kind of reflectivity in the back of their retina to see as well at night. So as a result, nature has given them massive eyes, and this is just how they look, and they really don't blink at all, but they're highly carnivorous, and they go after small rodents and crickets, and they're voracious. They jump from tree to tree, have these really interesting spindly looking fingers and hands. And you know, I thought, well, you know, I don't know if I'm ever going to see one of these guys. And lo and behold, on an expedition a couple of years ago, I got the chance of witnessing and viewing these guys, chance of a lifetime with my group of expeditioners, and got just such a dreamy photo. It's still one of my most prized photos of my entire collection of photos from 20 years of guiding on all 7 continents. Western tarsier, Denim Valley, healthy population of these guys. They're rare to see, but they're not rare in the environment, which is why I like this primary rainforest so much. And hiking around with great groups of adventurers, there's just something truly extraordinary about this grand finale in Borneo of every expedition I lead, ending up in the Denim Valley with this massive towering forest of the way I think the natural life is meant to be. So with that, I know I'm over time, but I'm here for questions. So Kendall, as much time as you got, I'm happy to keep the conversation going.
Great, yeah, we will take questions maybe for the next 10 or 15 minutes. I just want to remind folks, if you have a question for Court, you can submit those in your control panel under the questions field. All right, a lot of good questions for you, Court. Can you remind us again of the number of insects and mammals and bird species in Borneo?
Oh, pop quiz. Okay, so 222 different species of mammals, I think 422 different species of birds. Remember, these things could change because these stats might have been from a year ago, you know, 3 more critters a month. But absolutely fascinating. As far as insect species, you know, I don't know the exact total number of insect species found in Borneo. I can say that on each single tall emergent tree in the forest, there can be up to 1,000 different species. So the number is like in the hundreds of thousands, if not millions. Just to give you an example of what we do and don't know about insects, worldwide, we know there are about 1.5 million species of insects worldwide. We estimate that there are probably another 28 or 29 million we haven't discovered yet. So, you know, do the math. I easily, there are millions of species in Borneo. We probably haven't discovered them all yet.
Wow, amazing. Do you know what kind of trees are in the forests?
About 15,000 different species, believe it or not. So the big popular one, like a lot of the tree that we're seeing in this scene are Mangroves trees and dipterocarps. Dipterocarps, basically a way of saying like 2-winged seeds. 15,000 different species. I mean, the diversity is extraordinary. So it's actually pretty hard, even for a naturalist like myself or a local naturalist, a local guide, to go tree to tree and say, okay, boom, 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 because there are so many species. But they're mostly in those groups, the big, tall, highly, like the very tall emergent trees.
Okay. Now, is it true with insects, like it is, say, with birds, that males are prettier than females?
Not as much. I would say, so birds, yes, absolutely. If you've been watching any of the Planet Earth or Attenborough's new documentary, A Life on This Planet, he gives a good little segment on birds of paradise. And yeah, it's usually the case. I would say it's much more likely to be the case with fish, actually. A lot of fish, coral reef, tropical fish, the males are much more colorful. With insects, I would say the butterflies would be there, but of those, it's really just the birds of paradise butterflies. If you're not familiar with that group of butterflies, worth a Google. The males usually are very ornate, and the females are usually a little bit more of a drab coloration. So yeah, not quite the same, but life in general kind of has that direction a little bit. I mean, you know, birds are probably the best example though.
Okay. And someone watching said they heard recently that orangutans use medicinal plants to treat pain. Have you witnessed this?
Not witnessed, but I can confirm it's the case. Yeah, in terms of And we actually think that's probably the case for any sort of leaf eating, especially primate, but like anything that's leaf eating, they probably know exactly what's going on, what chemicals are in those leaves. You're talking about, millions of years of genetic memory. If we, hadn't discovered / invented writing and communication, we'd probably be relying on genetic memory nowadays more and more, just by, oh, okay, this smells like it'll help if I feel this way and this way and this way. So no, even if I have witnessed it, it would be really difficult to tell whether that was happening, because if it'd be hard to know if an orangutan had a tummy ache, or if it had like arthritis, or it had what was going on, and knowing that it's eating that leaf specifically. But yes, they definitely do use medicinal leaves. And actually, a lot of early folks in Borneo, some of the indigenous folks, would watch the orangutans to see what they're eating, to determine whether that's safe or not. Is that an edible plant? Because their genetics and their stomachs are pretty similar. That is a good way of telling. So a lot of our own traditional ecological knowledge of medicinal plants started from watching the animals.
Very cool. Why do orangutans build a new nest every night?
Well, it's probably because they don't build them very sturdily. They don't have huge home ranges. I mean, it's a good question as to why they don't ever return the same nest night after night. It has probably something to do with protection, defense. They don't want to be found, by clouded leopards, et cetera, but we don't really know why they have to do it each and every night. You would think they could reuse it, but in biology, everything is doing something, either because they're trying to mate and reproduce, they're trying to eat, or they're trying to not get eaten. And it's one of those things.
Mm-hmm. Okay, switching to turtles, you mentioned that the turtles lay eggs every day. Do the eggs also hatch on a daily basis?
Yes, yeah, so you saw that huge pen. So the way they do it, it takes a gestation or like an incubation time of like 45 to 60 plus days for a turtle egg to be laid and then hatch. So obviously it takes a couple months, but then, those eggs collected 2 months ago are hatching, and usually any night about 10 or 12, well, really pretty much exactly as many clutches as were collected 2 months ago hatched. And they usually hatch the late afternoon, so we can actually see the turtles coming out of the sand in those pens. And I didn't mention this, but we do get a chance with the researchers to take a basket of fresh baby turtles down to the water and release them directly in the water to swim out to the moonlight and be gone. So yeah, they're hatching every night.
Great. And on the subject of that, when the researchers dig up the turtles, does that affect the gender of the turtle? Since turtles, depending on the temperature, that determines their gender?
Yeah, great question. So you couldn't quite see it from the photos, but they have two main halves of the pen. So in each pen has hundreds of those little green kind of tubes to help protect against avian predators, like so birds don't fly in there and get in. One half has a big shade tree over it. One half is in full sunlight. So the saying goes, hot girls, cool guys. So if you have a higher temperature, they turn into females. If it's a cooler temperature, it turns into males. So the eggs are actually collected right after they're laid. So when I say dig up the eggs, the turtle doesn't totally have a chance to bury that whole clutch. They're actually collected pretty much as they drop, because they're also, as they drop, they're the most flexible. They haven't hardened yet, so it keeps them protected the most. But yeah, I mean, going to the root of your question, yeah, 100% temperature affects gender.
Okay. So sun bears, how long are their tongues, and how in the world do they fit into their mouths?
Yeah, I mean, so as far as their length, I don't know exactly. I bet you approaching 10 to 12 inches, for an adult sun bear. How do they fit? It's just compression. I mean, there are a lot of critters that have those big long tongues. I mean, anteaters, they have, they have snouts to them, but yeah, they're extraordinarily long. I would say definitely tongue to body ratio, the largest of any of the bears. But keep in mind, even the mighty brown bear and grizzly, when they emerge from hibernation each winter in the lower 48, like those grizzlies of Yellowstone and Grand Tetons, what's the first thing that they're eating? Grubs, moths, any sort of ants they can get their hands on. You know, they don't all go after animals. They don't all go after fish. Bears are pretty adapted to finding the little critters in life. They just need a lot of them.
Mm-hmm. And on that subject, someone just asked, how many termites or ants does a bear need to eat to survive?
11,422. No, but you can imagine. So, I mean, a bear. So these are small bears. So, like, let's just imagine. Let's imagine you have a big dog at home, like a big dog, like a Newfoundland or Great Dane, that is in like the well over 100 pounds. You know, they're gonna eat the proportion that that dog would eat each day in kibble, the same poundage in ants and termites. That's a lot of ants and termites. So I mean, it really is. It's probably, if they get their hands on it, thousands, absolutely thousands. But also remember, a lot of life is used to gorging when the getting's good and fasting when it's not. So they have the ability to turn that fat and that protein and those carbohydrates into fat stored in their body. That's where, if you see Fat Bear Week, which just happened in Alaska, where all the bears that have fattened up from eating the salmon, I mean, they don't look like bears anymore. They look like aliens because they're like twice the size. I mean, almost as if they can't walk, like they have to roll down the hill. So some bears will do that too. The big difference though is that, there's almost no seasonality in Borneo other than different rain patterns. But there's no winter where termites don't grow. There's no winter where moths don't grow like in Yellowstone. So it's a much more consistent food source.
Okay. And that's a nice segue to some of our final questions. There's a lot of questions about the trip specifically. So people want to know things like, how strenuous is the trip? What's the temperature like? How's the humidity? And when's the best time to visit?
Yeah, great question. So remember that definition of adventure and the high level of hazard. No, I'm kidding. No, so a lot of the expeditions that I lead are meant for anybody that has a strong curiosity. You have to be mobile. You got to want to hike, but it's definitely not like trekking to see gorillas. It's not like all-day hikes through the Andes or the Alps. Borneo, the areas of Borneo that we're going to be in is relatively flat. The big thing is that it's a lot of walking, like starting and stopping, looking and standing. So, you might be standing for a couple hours of the day. The terrain, especially in the Denim Valley, can be muddy. It can have roots. It can be a little bit of uphill and downhill there and there, but, at most we're walking, a couple miles a day. We probably do a little bit more walking in the airport to catch our next flight to some far-flung corner of Borneo, because the wildlife is really just right there. And then while we're in Baco, a lot of the stuff we're doing is by the boat. A lot of this, all of the stuff in Kinematangan is going to be by boat, or 90% of it is by boat. So yeah, not a high degree of physicality, but you definitely want to, be ready to get out there, because it is, more or less an adventure. Best time of year to go, really anytime from like March through September, October. The real rains aren't going to be until like kind of a December, January, February time period. I always say rainforests have two seasons, the rainy season and the rainier season. We tend to go on our expeditions in just the rainy season, so we'll get rained out, I usually say once or twice. It's funny, I can't tell you how many expeditions I say that. We go out on our very first excursion, we get rained on, we never see rain the rest of the trip. We're like, all right, hey, got it done. We got our rain. So it's not gonna be a whole lot. So yeah, March through October. And then is that pretty much, was that everything, Kendall?
Yeah, temperatures and humidity.
Temperatures. So temperatures are very stable. They're not hot like you'd expect in the Southwest deserts. Like, you go to a trip to Zion National Park or Grand Canyon in August or September, you can be getting some real warm temperatures, like high 90s. In Borneo, you're looking at like 80s year round. And that's kind of like daytime and nighttime temperatures. Fortunately, our expeditions, we do try to stay in climate controlled accommodations in rooms at night, because the humidity is very high. So it's not so much the temperature that gets to you, but it is very high humidity. So you do sweat a lot. But on a normal welcome dinner presentation, I would talk all about the hydration options, because physically being out there, even though we're not running around, we're not doing any sort of real hard hiking, it is very humid. So that 87 degree weather, it feels pretty warm.
Mm-hmm. Okay, final question today. What size camera lens is appropriate for Borneo?
Oh, well, you know me, 100 to 400 millimeter, and that goes for crop frame or full frame sensor. It's a sweet spot where it's not going to be a huge lens, but it's going to give you the range. It's not going to be a fantastic aperture rating, but not a bad aperture rating. The optical quality you can get in the 100 to 400 is really, really great just because of optical physics with the distance of lens parts and whatnot. So yeah, 100 to 400. I've seen people bring 200 to 500s. That's kind of like a new category of lenses. You know, if maybe I'll do a Borneo photo presentation. I could get pretty deep with it. If you have anything bigger, you certainly could, but you don't need it per se. So like kind of your general good zoom telephoto lens is going to be right on the money.
Okay, great. Well, I appreciate you covering this enormous topic. I know there's much more you could cover, so thank you so much for staying late to take questions, and I will turn it back over to you for closing comments.
Yeah, well, I'm actually amazed. I finished somewhat near time because as I was getting into like, I have 143 slides on it. That's the most slides, but I couldn't stop. And I was passing up all these other photos and all these other things. And I'm like, how can I not put a photo of that in there? So trust me, as crazy as it sounds, this really is the tip of the iceberg. You know, thank you for joining me on the expedition. It'll be a pleasure to join you in the field. If you've got questions, if you've got thoughts, let us know. Thanks for joining on this virtual expedition today. I hope it was fun, insightful, and maybe you came away with a better appreciation for this island paradise.
Thank you, Court. There is demand for a Borneo photo presentation, so let's keep that in mind. Yeah. All right, and my thanks as well to everyone who tuned in today. We did record today's presentation, so we will have that replay available on our website soon. And join us tomorrow for our next Daily Dose of Nature. With that, I'll conclude the webinar. Goodbye, everybody.